JFK's Civil Rights Bill. John F. Kennedy had won the presidency in 1960 in one of the closest elections in U.S. history. Realizing his lack of a mandate, he decided to concentrate on foreign policy in his first term, planning to deal more actively with domestic issues such as civil rights after his re-election. Therefore, many civil rights leaders had little support on civil rights issues from the Kennedy administration. However, the continued violence against demonstrators, particularly in Birmingham, convinced President Kennedy that the federal government should take a greater role. In June 1963, Kennedy announced on national television a plan to introduce comprehensive civil rights legislation. Unfortunately, the bill stalled in Congress and went no further during Kennedy's lifetime. After Kennedy's assassination, President Lyndon Johnson spurred the push to get the bill through as a memorial to the fallen president. It finally passed as the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. Both Kennedy and King emphasized that defeating segregation had become an issue of morality over and above political or social equality. In addition, both claimed that African Americans could and should no longer wait for improvements in their civil rights. In addition, where King exhorted blacks to take direction to achieve their goals, Kennedy seemed to be speaking from the top down to those in positions of power who prevented blacks from enjoying equality. This is from JFK's speech announcing the bill. The March on Washington. The origins of the 1963 March on Washington go back to 1941 when A. Philip Randolph, the president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters labor union, planned a march in the Capitol in order to protest discrimination in defense plans. Randolph shelved his plans when President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued the Fair Employment Act. By 1963, members of the civil rights movement had begun to call for another march. A coalition of several different civil rights and labor groups, the Big Six, met to organize the march. The Big Six leadership included Randolph, James Farmer of CORE, Dr. Martin Luther King of the SCLC, John Lewis of the SNCC, Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, and Whitney Young of the National Urban League. They selected Bayard Rustin, a civil rights activist who had been involved in various protests in the 1950s, as the march's coordinator. The focus of the march had changed from its original purpose of ending job discrimination. Organizers saw this new march as a way to promote several different issues under the umbrella of civil rights. The passage of meaningful legislation, including laws against discrimination in hiring and eliminating of segregation in public schools, and protection against police brutality, in addition to improved public works programs, an increase in the federal minimum wage, and self-rule for the District of Columbia. The march. Opposition. While many supported and backed the march, some criticized it as ill-timed or lacking the correct priorities. President Kennedy, for example, originally disapproved the march, feeling that legislators might see the movement as a threat and would vote against civil rights legislation. Militant civil rights leaders such as Malcolm X saw the march as an inaccurate, sanitized picture of racial harmony, calling it the farce on Washington. Black Muslims who attended the march faced suspension from the Nation of Islam. While many labor unions supported the march and many of their members participated in the march itself, the AFL-CIO, the biggest labor union in the nation, remained neutral. The march. Highlights. More than 250,000 people crowded the mall between the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial. The Capitol Police Force, concerned about the possibility of unruliness in so large a crowd, instead found that the march resembled more a communal celebration than a protest. Television and radio covered this peaceful gathering live. Several well-known performers and celebrities spoke and sang at the march, including Mahalia Jackson, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Marian Anderson, and Peter, Paul, and Mary. Other celebrities included Harry Belafonte, Charlton Heston, Ozzie Davis, Diane Carroll, Lena Horne, Paul Newman, and Sidney Poitier. However, most remember the march as the occasion of Dr. Martin Luther King's iconic, internationally known, "I Have a Dream" speech. Considered by many to be one of the greatest in American history, King's hopeful, forward-thinking speech defined the civil rights movement. In one particularly stirring part that encapsulated the movement's loftiest goals, King stated, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a desert state, sweltering with the heat of injustice and oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. 16th Street church bombing. The success of the March on Washington notwithstanding, 1963 continued to be a bloody year for the Civil Rights Movement. In September, members of the Ku Klux Klan bombed Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church, a frequent meeting place for civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King. The explosion instantly killed 4 girls, Addie Mae Collins, age 14, Denise McNair, age 11, Carol Robertson, age 14, and Cynthia Wesley, age 14, and wounded nearly 2 dozen. The blast destroyed parts of the church and several nearby automobiles, and also damaged a laundromat across the street. Eyewitnesses recalled seeing a white man place a box under the steps of the church a few minutes before the explosion, and identified Klan members Robert Edward Chambliss and Bobby Frank Cherry as the bombers. 2 other Klan members, Herman Frank Cash and Thomas E. Blanton, were also implicated. Authorities found Chambliss guilty of possessing dynamite without a permit, but charged no one with the bombing. In 1977, after determining that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had withheld evidence the Bureau had gathered in the investigation, authorities reopened the case. A jury convicted Chambliss of all 4 murders. He died in prison in 1985. Cherry and Blanton, Cash had already died, were not convicted until 2000. Both received life in prison. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was introduced by John F. Kennedy. After his passing, it was guided through Congress by Lyndon Baines Johnson. The act basically prohibited discrimination in public accommodations, which would include movie theaters, restaurants, restrooms, water fountains. It also, as part of the act, ended unfair voting requirements, such as literacy tests. And it also made the enforcement of the legislation easier by giving the federal government the ability to make sure that the law was being followed.